All right, hi everyone. Welcome to Nostalgia Trap. My name is David Parsons, and I am very excited to bring you this conversation. Had a really fun time talking with my friends Bill Black and KJ Shepard the other night about Reality Bites, a film that came out in 1994, directed by Ben Stiller, supposed to be like the Gen X movie. I was surprised to find out that none of us had actually seen this movie, so we all kind of came to it with fresh eyes. And sort of wanted to think about it in terms of, what is this film really saying about the 20s experience in the early 90s? How is it a Gen X movie? But also sort of blow apart the idea of that you can condense a generational experience to this hour and 40-minute romantic comedy starring these beautiful young white people. There's a lot to say about Reality Bites, and our good friend Bill Black was kind enough to send an excerpt from a really great book, and it has a great take on Reality Bites that I wanted to share at the outset because I think it touches on a lot of what we're trying to get to in this conversation, which is, what is this film really giving us, and why did it become such a touchstone for this quote-unquote Gen X brand or vision or whatever it might be. And we have a lot of different ideas we throw out in this conversation and a lot of fun making fun of a lot of this stuff too. But this is from Chuck Klosterman's book. Chuck Klosterman's book, Sex, Drugs, and Cocoa Puffs, a Low Culture Manifesto. Klosterman is a really fun culture writer. If you haven't read his stuff before, I think you would have a lot of fun, especially linking up with a lot of the pop culture that we talk about on Nostalgia Trap, a lot of 90s stuff. But here's Klosterman's take. I want to read this excerpt because I think it'll set us up for where we want to go with Reality Bites, and he does link it, of course, to Star Wars. So here's Chuck Klosterman. As an 8-year-old, the final message of The Empire Strikes Back felt remarkably hopeless. Luke's a good person, but Luke's still lost. And it wasn't like the end of Rocky, where Apollo Creed wins the split decision, but Rocky wins a larger victory for the human spirit. Darth Vader beats Luke the way Ike used to beat Tina. A psychologist once told me that, over the span of her entire career, she had never known a man who didn't have some kind of creepy, unresolved issue with his father. She told me that's just an inherent part of being male. And here we have a movie where the hero is fighting every ideology he hates, gets his ass kicked, and is then informed, oh, and by the way, I'm your dad, but you knew that all along. In this same scene, Darth Vader tells Skywalker he has to make a decision. He can keep fighting a war he will probably lose, or he can compromise his ethics and succeed wildly. Many young adults face a similar decision after college, and those seen as responsible inevitably choose the latter path. However, an 8-year-old would never sell out. Little kids will always take the righteous option. And what's intriguing about Gen Xers is they never really wavered from that decision. Luke's quandary in The Empire Strikes Back is exactly like the situation facing Winona Ryder in 1994's Reality Bites. Should she stick with the nice, sensible guy who treats her well, Ben Stiller? Or should she roll the dice with the frustrating boho bozo who treats her like crap, Ethan Hawke? For a detached adult, that answer seems obvious. For people who were 21 when this movie came out, the answer was just as obvious but completely different. As we all know, Winona went with Hawke. She had to. When Gene Siskel and Roger Ebert reviewed Reality Bites, I recall them complaining that Ryder picked the wrong guy. As far as I could tell, choosing the wrong guy was the whole point. You don't often see Reality Bites mentioned as an important or even particularly good film, but it grows more seminal with every passing year. When it was originally released, all its Gap jokes and AIDS fears and Lisa Loeb songs merely seemed like marketing strategies and ephemeral stabs at insight. However, it's amazing how one film so completely captured every hyper-conventional ideal of such a short-lived era. Reality Bites is a period piece in the best sense of the term. And in the same way, I have a special place in my heart for the first film I saw inside a movie house. I reserve a special place in my consciousness for the first film so unabashedly directed toward the condition of my own life. I was graduating from college the spring Reality Bites was released, and though it didn't necessarily seem like a movie about me, it was clearly a movie for me. 18 months earlier, everyone I knew had seen Cameron Crowe's Singles, which we initially viewed as a youth movie. When we went back and rented Singles in the summer of '94, I was suddenly struck by how old its cast seemed. I mean, they had full-time jobs and wanted to get married and have babies. Singles was just a normal romantic comedy that happened to have Soundgarden on the soundtrack. Reality Bites was an equally mediocre movie, but it validated a lot of mediocre lives, most notably my own. As I stated earlier, all the cliches about Gen Xers were true, but the point everyone failed to make was that our whole demographic was comprised of cynical optimists. Whenever my circa 1993 friends and I would sit around and discuss the future, there was always the omnipresent sentiment that the world was on decline, but we were somehow destined to succeed individually. Everyone felt they would somehow be the exception within an otherwise grim universe. This is why Ryder had to pick Hawke. Winona made the kind of romantic decision most people my age would have made in 1994. She pursued a path that was difficult and depressing, and she did so because it showed the slightest potential for transcendence. Not coincidentally, this is also the Jedi's path. Adventure, excitement, the Jedi craves not these things. However, he does crave something greater than the bloodless existence of his father. Quite simply, Winona Ryder is Luke Skywalker, only with a better haircut and a killer rack. So that's Klosterman's take on things. Very, very Gen X, I think, even in his attitudes towards gender there, etc. But Klosterman is a fun writer, and I think he has a lot of good takes on this sort of stuff. So this is what we try to do on this episode. We try to get into Reality Bites, and I think we all had particular takes on what this film meant to us. So I hope you enjoy this. We've got lots more of Nostalgia Trap stuff up all over the place. Go to nostalgiatrap.com. That's sort of the clearinghouse for all of our episodes. I can't believe we've done 260 episodes now. But go back and check those out. And if you want to support our show, that's the whole name of the game for us, because we don't have any support beyond our listeners. So if you can and want to get access to our bonus episodes, go to patreon.com/nostalgiatrap. We really appreciate it. And come by to our live episodes too. We are live every Thursday on YouTube at 1 p.m. Pacific time. Thanks so much for the people who come by and have fun with us. All right, enjoy this conversation. Here's me and KJ Shepard and Bill Black talking about the timeless classic, Reality Bites. It's great to see you guys. Bill Black, KJ Shepard, I brought you on because I wanted to talk about this fucking pile of shit movie from 1994 called Reality Bites. You know, this is a perfect Nostalgia Trap movie for me because I've never seen it. And so I went in with a clean slate on these characters. I had no, emotional attachment to them whatsoever. But I wonder what you guys think of it, and I also wonder what you think of it as a weird hybrid Houston, not Houston movie, because I feel like this movie didn't give me a very good idea about Houston. I don't feel like I learned much about it. But either one of you can jump in. I'd like to know, when did you guys see this movie? Did you see it young? Because I didn't at all. I saw it last week for the first time.
I mean, I'm really surprised that you hadn't seen it, David, because you were the only one of the three of us whose balls had fully dropped by the time that this movie came out.
I don't know if that's true, actually. I was a late dropper.
I mean, I was 7 when it came out.
Yeah, right.
I heard of it a bunch. I think just in the atmosphere of what are cool kids watching? What are adults who I think are cool are watching? But I'd never seen it until about 6 days ago.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Good.
I pulled a stunt. Yeah.
Another clean slate. What about you, Bill? Have you seen this movie before?
First time I saw it was today.
Dude, this is great.
But it was a movie, and it's honestly not a movie I remember hearing much about growing up. I don't remember so I'm 32. My sister's 42. My brother's 45. So I was the I feel like an under talked about thing of the millennial growing up with Gen X siblings, but I don't remember this being a movie that they were into. I was exposed to a lot of the John Hughes movies and that kind of stuff, but it was weird watching it. Because how to put it? I kept being convinced that they were older than they actually were. Like I was watching this feeling like they are older than me. Because if I had watched that in 1994, those were the big, the grown-ups.
Yeah.
And I swear I had to look up and be like, oh, wow, they're like a decade younger than me. Like Ethan Hawke is 23. Winona Ryder's like 24. But they just feel, watching it makes me feel like the kid. It almost reminds me of when you're in kindergarten and you see the fifth graders and just how big they look.
Mm-hmm.
That was,
No, even Garofalo, who I think was about 30 at the time of making it, like I just had the feeling of like, oh, cool big sister, right? Like it's just like they all feel fully grown. It's kind of like when we talked about Romy Michelle's David, and like I'd be like, these people are all supposed to be technically 27, right? It's the same problem of like, okay, I guess these are supposed to be like 20. Sure. Okay, let's roll with this. Yeah.
Yeah. It's weird because it's like this movie is, and I think this is why we wanted to talk about it, is because this movie is billed as like the Gen X movie. It defines the generation. And I think that's maybe overstated or whatever. But it does, I mean, it did bring back a lot of like constant tropes that were around in the 90s, particularly like, I mean, it feels like this whole thing, even the title of the movie, Reality Bites, which I always thought was about like, it meant like reality bites, like reality sucks. But it actually is like a reference to like the show, the documentary. Everyone was making documentaries in the 90s. But Winona Ryder's character was making this documentary called Reality Bites, like little bites of reality, right? I feel like that watching this movie, it did bring me back to a milieu that was around. But yeah, I was 15 years old when this movie came out, and I think that what you're identifying there, Bill, with like the difference between siblings, my brothers were older than me, and they were flannel wearing, going to shows, doing stuff that I wasn't doing. And there is a big difference between being 15 and being 23. Like they're like worlds. I mean, there's a big difference between 19 and 23, I think. Just like worlds apart. And this movie's about like stuff like, I don't know, getting out of college and like trying to negotiate jobs and shit. I couldn't have been further from like what they were talking about.
And I can't think of many movies that are about people right out of college. Like that is something that is kind of interesting about it. And I took notes. One note I wrote was,
I'm not surprised, Bill.
But this one stands out. I wrote, problem. Should she sell her documentary to a cable network that wants to buy it?
Yeah.
I'm curious, why do you think that this sticks out to me?
Well, we just watched American Beauty. I'm going to put that episode up. Claudia and I watched it, and it's like very similar. Like they're complaining about like, I hate my big giant house and nice car and like job that gives me security for the rest of my life. I hate it. What am I going to do with that? It's like, it feels like a very different sort of economic and political moment that they're describing. And yeah, my problem is I can't sell, or my documentary wants to, or someone wants to purchase my documentary would be not so much of like a philosophical conundrum as it would be in the 90s.
Oh, I'll even step back from that, right? So one thing that Winona Ryder's character, Lelena or Lainey, she has two names. She's quirky. I don't fucking know. But like at various points, we're told that she makes $400 a week, right? So I did the math. And so that is, if we're saying she gets 2 weeks unpaid vacation, let's just say, whatever, that is at 50 weeks, that is $20,000 in 1994. That is, with inflation, $35,301 in 2021. I was 33 years old before I made a job that like was above that. And now for various circumstances, I am no longer in that group. Like just sitting there the entire time. And I know that it's like, okay, she can't like live her dream. She can't live her dream with her artistic. But like I'm sitting there, I'm like, girl, just prepare interview notes. Like, girl, just write down like $400 fucking a week for a walk up. Like the only expense is like a second story 2-bedroom in fucking Houston. I can tell you the rents in 1990 in Houston. What the fuck is your problem, girl? Like what the fuck? Like what the ever living fuck?
Yeah, like now you could find an apartment in Houston for like $1,100, $1,000 a month.
Yeah.
And, it would have been much cheaper back then. But she's got these wealthy parents, we sort of gather. Her dad gives her, kind of the first crisis is that her dad's gifting her with this BMW when she has just given this commencement speech, sort of deriding, what is it she says? They wonder why we refuse to work an 80-hour week just so we can afford to buy their BMWs. And then she's given this BMW, she's given this gas debit, which I hadn't heard of a gas credit card.
That's very 80s, executive. It's kind of like having a car phone. It's like, he makes six figures.
I lived exactly her life, though. I think that they're picking up on something that must have been a trope, because it was the one thing that my dad sort of provided as a gift to me in the first year of college, because I was commuting. Was a gas card, and it was like a high school graduation gift. And he said, "I'll pay this, for the year," or something like that. But that quickly, I think he gave up on paying that after like a couple months, because I was buying so much beer and cigarettes with the.
So you did the exact same.
I did. I lived this. Yeah, I did not go in. I did not go into the gas station stoned with my friends and sing "My Sharona." I think it was probably a different song, but either way, that was really recognizable to me. That part of it, the gas credit card. I don't know if people must do gas credit cards. I imagine they exist.
I had one that was my first credit card, like in 2009, at the point where gas was literally $4.30 a gallon. So like that took a while to pay off.
That's about how much it is here right now, dude. Like that's close.
Jesus Christ, dude.
Yeah, gas is a bummer. It's weird because the movie is like, how would you describe her character? Because at the beginning, it's really clear. I mean, that opening speech, the valedictorian speech, is sort of a statement of purpose in a lot of ways. And I didn't write down exactly what she said, but there is this sentiment of like, she's talking to her boomer parents, and she's like, your generation were like, you invented a counterculture and you disemboweled it for a running shoe. There's this sort of like, you sold it out to Nike, you motherfuckers, and it's sort of real outrage at like consumerism and like that. All of that felt really 90s to me, except for the okay boomer stuff, which it seems like, God, the boomers now, I realize they've been getting beaten up for like 30 years. We've been fucking shitting on the boomers in response to their quote unquote selling out of the revolution. That part of it was interesting to me. I don't know how much the movie like really had to say about that, but selling out and like her wanting to like, I don't know, change the world in however naive and quirky way she might be doing it seems like an impulse that's like real in this movie.
Yeah, and she like, there's the moment where she really insults Jean Garofalo when, she's fired. Winona Ryder's fired because, she's being basically harassed by her boss, and so she gets back at him by humiliating him. She's fired, and then Jeanine Garofalo, who works at the Gap, offers her a job. Winona Ryder says, "I'm not going to work at the Gap, for Christ's sake." Like, it's just assumed that she wouldn't do that. And it is a weird. There is a lot that seems that hasn't changed, in that you have people who, I don't know, it does still feel kind of dead end. She is still kind of scrapping to figure out what kind of job she wants that actually has dignity. And I don't think that's not necessarily something that, we have to mock. I did wonder, something that was a little opaque to me, I think I'm a little too young to get it, is what's going on with this MTV ripoff sort of channel, the channel that Ben Stiller's character works for. It's weird because I didn't really realize until I was reading up just how Ben Stiller really kind of rose as a director kind of person.
Yep.
And really doesn't seem to have become this comedy actor star until There's Something About Mary, and then Meet the Parents. And
He had his own show though, like called
Yeah.
called the Ben
On
Stiller
MTV.
Show.
Yeah.
That
So
was
it's-
like
yeah.
sort of a early alt comedy thing, like a lot of like I don't know, like Bob Odenkirk and Janine Garofalo and David Cross and that whole crowd. I think they like came out of that, and that was sort of an early sort of alternative comedy thing in the mainstream. Ben Stiller, and like yeah, you're right. I think he directed the Cable Guy, the Jim Carrey. And yeah, then he became much more of a like Hollywood star on screen in the 2000s, I guess.
I guess I'm just asking, why does it seem so much like it's selling out to have her documentary be on this channel? I mean, obviously, the version that eventually ends up is this kind of chopped up thing that seems like a mockery of what her artistic vision was. But I don't know.
Wasn't even being on MTV was selling out, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
So-
there's a very famous magazine cover. I mean, it's Rolling Stone of like Kurt Cobain on the cover with like a handwritten T-shirt that says "Corporate magazines still suck." And it was like, this was the pose, man. It went all the way. And it didn't necessarily come from like, I don't know, a wider anti-capitalism or Marxism. It just felt like it was not cool to be like part of the Gap or MTV or any of the like big mainstream brands. That was just not where the energy was.
Maybe maybe the thing is that I grew up with nostalgia for 90s MTV as like being edgy.
Me too.
And people, remember when it used to actually have music videos on it, and when the real world was actually sort of kind of weird and not, I don't know, like. So to be in this mindset where MTV is seen as selling out like the Gap is something that I guess I didn't really grasp. What were you gonna say?
So I wonder if this is like an area where like screenwriter intention and director intention kind of crash into each other, and you get this kind of weird meta level, right? Because the screenwriter Helen Childress is like literally the age of these characters. She's really young when she writes it. She's like in her early 20s. It's like a series of fortunate events for her where she like just gets like a pretty sweet advance to write this, and she writes it in like 6 weeks. And then Ben Stiller kind of has her pretty deeply involved in the shooting, which isn't that common either, right? Like you don't really, usually you buy a script and it's like, all right, smell you later. We'll do whatever we want, or we'll doctor it or whatever. But he kind of keeps her around. And there's this kind of secondary building process where I think it kind of goes from her being this like young Xer kind of sneering her nose at, you know, like corporate culture, what will eventually become like the OK Cola of like boomers trying to sell Xer stuff by pretending that they're not selling them stuff. And what Stiller is adding to it, especially in like those end pieces, is like, oh, I've already done this, and I can tell you exactly how this looks and what it looks like to sell someone this, and what it looks like to be embarrassed by this, and what it looks like to compromise on this, or to like have your ideas vultured and then like spat back out at you, as we see in like the final credits, or like just even the commodification where like Jean Triplehorn is supposed to be Cindy Crawford in this parody of House of Style that you see a couple times. Like, I think it's this like naive is the wrong word, and I don't want it to sound sexist, but this kind of like young, naive look at it, like taking it as a person of this generation, meeting a director who's a few years older, who's like, let me tell you how MTV actually works, because
right.
Yeah.
And there, so I love that meta element of it, because it really, Reality Bites, it's the movie itself is doing what the movie characters are concerned with, which is that the corporation, MTV, the big Hollywood, the big record companies are going to take what's authentic and cool about youth culture, and they're going to sell it back to us in the form of T-shirts and sort of a packaged rebellion. That was really present in the discourse. I mean, I'm even thinking about like Mr. Show sketches, which are, you know, born out of the Ben Stiller show. They were a lot about selling out. They were a lot about corporate culture. They were a lot, and not only that, but they were a lot about how corporations are going to take whatever like youth spirit there is that's vaguely left and turn it into some product. And like that discourse sounds very like straightforward or simple to us now. Like today I'm thinking about like Black Lives Matter and Colin Kaepernick and becoming like a Nike figure. And I'm kind of like, well, what would that be like in the 90s? What would people be saying about that? It feels like selling out doesn't quite have the same discourse to it. Although I'm sure there are plenty of people who have a lot to say about the Nike thing. But yeah, Reality Bites exists as an example of what it's critiquing. It's Reality Bites is, here are your pretty teenage rock and roll kids, and Ethan Hawke's character is probably the most loudly sort of communicated as like, this is the cool guy. I wonder what you guys think of Troy and Michael, because the film is really a lot about how conventional this film is. I mean, it's almost like a fucking Jane Austen story. It's like this girl, played by Winona Ryder, Lelena, is torn between two dudes she's kind of interested in. One is her layabout slacker roommate, played by Ethan Hawke, called Troy. He's like I guess he just goes from job to job and plays in his rock and roll band and just wants to be an artist and live in the moment. And then the other dude she's dating is played by Ben Stiller, is Michael, who's sort of this guy that works at MTV basically and is going to help her maybe get her documentary sold. It's weird because I watched this movie, and this is exactly what I was talking about in the Nostalgia Trap. I watch this movie now when I'm older, and I was like, well, maybe you should go with Michael because it seems like a sensible decision. He's going to have a good job, good money. He's emotionally mature. And this guy, Troy, is a fucking layabout that's never going to do anything in his life and is going to, in Lelena's own words, be on his way to Loserville. Now I get that if I were young, I would have watched this movie and been totally in love with the Ethan Hawke character, been like rooting for these two to get together. But what do you guys think? Is this movie like, am I supposed to want her and Ethan Hawke to be together really bad? Is that really what I'm supposed to feel? Because part of me was like, Ben Stiller's not so bad.
I think this may be another part where we have this interesting. I rather enjoyed this movie, and I think maybe having the screenwriter's voice and the director's voice kind of both present in such a way that's a little unusual for the movie gives it that sort of thing where maybe it's like the way Ben Stiller portrays like that character and frames him. Yeah, he's kind of hard not to like, and he has solid points. I mean, when Ethan Hawke is just saying, deriding his low IQ, and Ben Stiller's character is just like, hey, we're just people. Like,
he's right. He's totally right. Ethan Hawke is being a pretentious asshole in that conversation.
Such a shithead, right? Yeah. I think in the original script, Michael is supposed to be kind of in his early 30s, right? So he's kind of supposed to be a bit older, and Ben Stiller is not that, right? He may be older than both of them, but he's not in his 30s. It's weird though, right? Because it's like Troy is a real shithead. He is a creep. He is a stalker. He's a lech. He's a voyeur. He's all of these things. And yet that scene when they're like talking in the bar, right? Where he's like, I wrote this song for you, songs for you. And like, she's like, I have to go to the bathroom. And then like they have, as maybe you've been there before, like that argument, like right in front of the bathroom, like where the phone is. Like that was perhaps the most relatable moment of like, okay, these are two people who are like, these are the terms of like how I'm going to be with you. And these are the terms of how I'm going to be with you. So at least on one level, it's like, he's not unaware of who he is. He's like, no, I want to be with you. I am in love with you, but I will probably eventually, wind up getting my dick wet with somebody else at some point, or like doing dumb shit, or just kind of like having a really lousy bout. And I think that's that weird sort of like kernel of like self-awareness that keeps it from being unbearable. Like that was the moment where the movie turned to me and being like, oh, I've been on both sides of this conversation. I've been both the Laney and the Troy in this. And you just figure out how to navigate it.
That's the moment that turned for me too, where there was a spark of Ethan Hawke knowing that he was a piece of shit and that there was something wrong with him, and that he was going to hurt her, and that he understood that. That part of it was appealing, because for most of the movie I was like, I've known this guy. Like I hung around with a lot of like long-haired dudes on the couch. that had acoustic guitars and
Thinks
had
they're a lot smarter than they are.
Yeah, and got lots of
Yeah,
girlfriends.
because we've all been to graduate school. Yes. Yeah.
Right. And so Ethan Hawke's portrayal of that character is like, okay, well, it's Ethan Hawke, so he's charming puppy dog kind of. He's really good at communicating that. But if I knew this guy in real life, I'd be like, fuck this guy. Get with Ben Stiller. He's got
Or like when he said when she says he doesn't do anything, and he says like, I have the band. And she's like, well then like fucking practice, like do shows. I think maybe we're supposed to think that she should be with him now because she's 21 or 22.
23.
And then
she seems so young. I mean, Winona Ryder looks insanely young.
I didn't know how old the character's supposed to be. I mean, I guess she just great, but that maybe 5-10 years she should be with someone like Ben Stiller. But maybe while she's still young, she needs to try this just to see. I don't know. Like
being with Ben Stiller is selling out, in a way. Like because a lot of the hostility in the 90s, it's weird because it's like, and I think it's spoken by Ethan Hawke's character at some point. He says like, "Oh, you want me to go like work on a factory line like my old man, and retire with my balls
the benefits
full of
and a pension." And
yeah, no, he says with my balls full of tumors.
Yeah,
I mean, basically, yeah. And
his gold-plated watch.
And my gold-plated watch. Yeah, that's the shift, dude. You're right, because it's like, sitting there being like, you want me to have a job for my whole life? Fuck you. And like, yeah, there's a lot of people today and be like, I'm desperate for that. Yeah, I don't know. But it is like, I think we're washing it out because it is like a desire for like meaning beyond the drudgery, and seeing that their parents are like unhappy and that it is less. I mean, I don't think it's as idealistic and like such a philosophical thing. I think it's like a practical reality. To me, I identify with Troy's character in the sense of like he can't hold down the job because he thinks it all fucking sucks, because it does. There's a part of me that really identifies. I mean, the younger part of me especially would really identify with that.
Yeah, jobs suck and love may be forever, but sometimes there's a pretty person in front of you, and that is very, very relatable on both sides of that. I don't want to be like sad face corner, but I think like if we're all positioning ourselves positionally, there is something that's really foreign about this movie in so much as like there is how I'm supposed to position myself to this movie is like through this really minor secondary character played by Steve Zahn, who is like charming and cute, and like I have mixed feelings about Steve Zahn, but I think he's like really cute here. But also like there's a bit of a cipher, right? Like this really deeply underwritten gay character that kind of exists as like a reaction shot, like where we only like see him go like he's like laughing or stifling a laugh or being like this kind of choking over his own words and stumbling and being awkward. So like in some ways, yeah, I guess I really relate to the Troy character as a lech and a loser. But like honestly, if I'm supposed to be like viewing this and be like, how am I having this vantage point? How am I like seeing myself in this movie? It's like it is through this kind of like underdevelopment of the gay character and queer characters in general in the 90s, right? Where they just don't quite know what to do with them, and then they try to pass the buck of like, well, we can't give him every storyline, so we'll make sure Vicky has the AIDS scare instead of him. Like so they try to like fix some of the script issues, and then they kind of make it worse by like giving him nothing. And then Janine Garofalo might have AIDS ? Because she likes like popping her pussy. I don't know. It was just on those things. Yeah.
When did Philadelphia come out? It was like 1993, right? It was like a year before.
It was around the same time. Yeah.
I mean, I said to you guys, I think when we were texting about this movie, I was like, well, it's a 90s movie. It's Gen X. There's got to be like gay stuff in it, and there's probably some AIDS stuff in it. And I wasn't disappointed. Those elements were there, but they do them. It's like I talked about this in the class that I taught at Emerson College. It's like a film class, and we watched Philadelphia, and we watched How to Survive a Plague, and we thought about sort of the reality of gay life and AIDS in the 80s versus the way it was being portrayed in cinema. And it was like, God, there's so many angles to it, but the Steve Zahn character in this film is like nothing. Like I feel like it's forgotten. At the same time, it's like there has to be like a gay character. There has to be and the stories are always the same. like coming out of the closet, or like dealing with like homophobic violence. And like how many gay characters, like we're leading into like the Boys Don't Cry era and like all that stuff. And I don't know where Reality Bites fits into that, because it seems like they didn't really care to think about it that much.
It feels underthought and overthought at the same time.
Right.
So like it's it's still a few years off with the major change in like medication. So it is just never present reality in terms of just like AIDS and fear of AIDS and just sort of its ever presence with sexuality. So like not going to fault them to that per se, but it feels like, and it's a recurring stereotype in terms of any marginalized community of just like over and underbaked at the same time. Somehow like the crust is burnt and it's raw in the middle of just like they either needed an extra scene or they needed some more peppering of just his kind of like presence there. There's no dimensionality to him besides the fact that he's just kind of like this shell. And it's not even like this intentional, like it'd be one thing if he was like intentionally made to be this kind of like, he's so stifled and sort of like in his own head about like not being out, that he is this kind of like stammering, stumbling shell of a dude before he like comes out or gets laid or like finally, like
almost like a Sal Mineo or Anthony Perkins kind of.
Monty Cliff that shit, right? But like it's one of those things of like they could either have like laid into the fact that he was underdeveloped by like making that the character trait that's intentional, or they could have given him more to do. But like it is one of those movies where you're like looking at it and it's a case in point. All right, so like a comparison from the same time period is Clueless, which has a secondary gay character who is very minor. Like he's very much a secondary character, even maybe a tertiary character, but he is like perfectly formed. He is like, I am here. This is the plot development. Like you see me, you get me. And he comes in with all of this swagger, and then you realize, oh, it's because you are a baby cocksucker, right? And it's very definitely done in terms of like the scripting, the acting, and then also like these cutaways where you see like Brittany Murphy in the foreground, and he is like dancing to house music at 2 a.m. with some dude in the background. Like
he brought over Tony Curtis movies to watch.
Right. It's so deftly done with an economy.
Yes, you're right.
An economy.
You're right. And there's a savviness to it that's not present at all. There's no like hip savviness to, or even like seemingly like any knowledge of like gay life or culture in this film. It's more just like kind of like thrown in there as like this really flat sitcom character. It also makes me think of the character that, I don't know if you guys saw this movie. This is a maximum 90s movie, but As Good as It Gets with Jack Nicholson and
Greg Kinnear.
He
exists only to be beaten up.
Dude, and he's constantly like, my father hated me because I'm gay, and like all of it is just so intense, and I'm like, God,
all of it is like teen monologues when you want to get into. And I'm like,
don't you have like a really fucking nice artist loft, and you seem like very successful and rich to me. I like that movie's fucked up. I haven't seen it in a long time. What were you gonna say, Bill? I'm sorry.
That was just weird. That was like precocious, 14-year-old Bill. It was like one of my favorite movies.
Loved it. Me too. I was a precocious 14-year-old at 20.
I think I saw it pretty young because like I was diagnosed with OCD like in the sixth grade. And then my dad was like, "Hey, you should watch this movie. It's about a guy with OCD." And I saw it, and I was like, "This is so great." I love.
You're like, "This is what's in store for you."
So that's a weird film that like nearly swept the Oscars. But
it was, that movie was like unbelievably successful for being like just a something that would just be a Netflix movie that nobody watches now. It succeeded because of Jack Nicholson, I think, saying racist shit, and they were
literally just verite. They just started the camera. They're like, Jack is very strict.
Yeah, I assume so.
Let me see here.
It's weird that's part of the character of Jack Nicholson in the 90s, is like, that he's a total fucking asshole.
Oh, when he left Angelica Houston for Diane Cannon and then just turned into like LA shit. Yeah.
Hey, pause, name drop. I got to hang out with Diane Cannon a lot because I was a PA on the sitcom that she was a part of. And I have no interesting stories about it.
Oh.
That was a big tease for nothing. Yeah.
God, okay. I have to tease you off camera about that, but like, because I was gonna say something that was like not appropriate for air right now.
Cancelable.
Yep.
That's the cancel B-roll.
Here's something I realized while watching this is that I grew up with no 7-Elevens.
Wow.
What the fuck?
Like
Wow.
because it's this funny thing where like they don't want to sell out and they're all against things being commodified, and yet so much of their personalities are shaped by like the mass consumed things that they consume. Right?
Yep.
Ethan Hawke says that one of the best things that makes life worth living is the quarter pounder with cheese, which is interesting that this is coming out the same year as Pulp Fiction, where we also have and there's the first love scene between her and Ben Stiller. They're both grasping these big gulps in this.
That's right. Yeah.
Comic scene. And I was thinking, like, I've like always known that a 7-Eleven like would be just sort of a generic term for a convenience store, kind of like Kleenex or Band-Aid. But I was like, wait, did I ever? I don't remember. And I looked it up. There's no 7-Elevens in the Memphis area, and Houston's the only place I've lived that has them. And it started in Dallas. It started in Dallas, so I think it might be like especially present in Texas. I don't know.
No, they're ever present in Florida, where I grew up. I think.
Yeah, they're dominant, dude. They're everywhere.
It is nasty ass culture. You know, like
they have
you
good.
Go out.
That's a good coffee section, though. I have to say, like 7-Eleven's coffee is just insane, and like the different selections of creamers and sugar options and like flavors. I mean,
if you're adjuncting,
32 ounces for like 99 cents. It's kind of unbelievable.
And it is rocket fuel. It is like straight up like you can teach a 3-hour section and like just coast on like half a menthol during the break, and you just when I lived in the Valley, the San Fernando Valley in Los Angeles, speaking of Clueless, you know, the streets are so straight and flat there, and the grid is so long that you can just like stand in the middle of an intersection and see for miles of just like the same shit, like strip mall after strip mall after strip mall. And I used to sort of like stand at a 7-Eleven, sometimes like getting gas. The 7-Elevens are often connected to gas stations, and like count how many other 7-Elevens I could like see with the naked eye from that 7-Eleven. And that's it's extensive. Wow. They had a death grip on that place, and they all of them are the same inside. So like it just stop at 7-Eleven, you go into the same place every time. And what I remember about them is a lot of them are owned by people who are Muslim. And after 9/11. Like there was just this unbelievable expression of like patriotism at these places. So you like went in them and it was just like a pornography of like red, white, and blue stuff. Support our troops. We remember 9/11. And it was there's something really, really, like just depressing about that. Going into a corporate place like that. And yeah, I mean it's really on the nose when they're kissing and like they're holding the big gulps and like get it. This is the world we live in now. But the movie is about that. Like the movie is in part about like corporations in a clumsy way. That's what it seems to be about. That's what I wanted to like poke at, right? Because it is about corporations, and then it's also about irony, like irony : what it is, right? Like, and so that's what we keep seeing like throughout the movie, right? So like when they're in the 7-Eleven the first time, and they're high, and Lainey realizes they can't afford a pizza, but they can afford snacks and shit on the gas card. They all start dancing to My Sharona, right? And they're not dancing like, again, not to be like I'm a faggoty ass faggot, but like if I'm dancing, like it's like, oh, like yeah, no, I'm gonna fucking dance. Like they're like doing irono dancing of just like it's kind of the robot, it's kind of like, for lack of better terms, the Carlton from the early, you know what I mean? Like it's kind of like
it's a dance that's like making fun of dancing.
Of the fact that they are so excited that they want to dance. And I think that's this recurring theme throughout not only the movie, but also like Gen X culture that I always felt at a remove of is like the am I laughing because I'm laughing, or am I laughing at myself because I feel like I'm supposed to be laughing, or am I making fun of the fact that culture tells me to laugh, and so I'm pretending to laugh, parentheses, but I'm actually laughing. Like, I guess maybe there's something very hyper-capitalist about millennials after all, because I'm like, just fucking dance, you dumb cunts. Like, just like it's so.
Yeah, there's a lot of hand
obnoxious.
wringing about like who they
Yeah.
are. You know what I mean? It seems like that's part of it. Is like they don't really even their identities seem like they're not really sure of who they should be. I mean, the Janine Garofalo character at some point, she says like, I sometimes I wish I were a lesbian. Like life would be so much easier. And Winona Ryder tells her that like, you know, you're the one that's actually dumping all these guys. You're not being dumped by them. And she's sort of like ambivalent and troubled by her sexual life, Janine Garofalo's character. And I feel like the movie is touch on all of them in that way. They're all like sort of not sure what the right identity is to inhabit, but they're sure that they don't want to be like. They're sure that they don't want to be like their parents and like the previous generation.
Right.
I mean, there's that long monologue that Ethan Hawke has that I think is very Gen X. That's like talking about like being a product of divorce and saying that like my dad was gone and I only saw him a couple times a year, and then eventually he brought me a seashell when he was dying of cancer and told me that's what life is this, you know, sort of empty thing. And it's really like. It's really 90s poetry that that moment. It feels very lost in that time, but at the same time, I feel like it's expressing something really troubling that is probably more present in stuff like Nirvana or whatever that Reality Bites is picking up on. They're picking up on this like sort of fucked up generation that is the product of like wasted hippies and like boomers that sold themselves out.
Right. Like it's that weird thing where like I want to make fun of it, right? Because I want to be like, all of these things feel like shitty Maggie Estep, shitty spoken word from the early 90s. Oh, your childhood divorce. I was like, I'm literally the only person I knew whose parents were married. Right? Like it's just like I want to make fun of all of this. But it is one of those things that like starting with like even like family ties with like older boomers and like carrying throughout like the 90s, like there's like 15 years of just like people trying to figure out what happens when you have this massive generation of people who like buy into a certain relationship to the state, buy into a certain relationship to capital, who are subsidized, like the state is subsidizing their economic well-being in a way that at least for white, middle and upwardly mobile whites feels invisible. Right. So they feel like there's no sort of like state assisting them in their well-being. What happens when they all like literally turn into shitheads? Mm-hmm. And it's like into literal monsters. Right. Like, and I can't be like, as someone of a generation that like is always looking askance that like, I can't be too annoyed at Xers for that kind of like what the fuckedness.
Yeah.
Like as annoying as the like semi-ironic singing of Conjunction Junction is, as annoying as all of the like slogans as dialogue, as feelings, as non-feelings are. Like I can't be annoyed at them for like making sense of it with the detritus and recollage of their lives.
How forgiving are you of these boomers? Are these?
Well, I also want to dick down Ethan Hawke, so like there's a bit of like it's a little
Bill, what do you think of that Gen X irony stuff? Because I mean, I feel like I'm you know, you guys are younger than me, but I was still at an age when I feel like I'm closer to Gen X as I get older, if that makes sense. Like when it was actually happening, it was just like some shit that was on TV, and now I recognize, okay, this is like what people just a slightly older than me were going through. But how did you come to terms with that? Because I mean, you were a lot younger at the time than I was. And this this Gen X ironic detachment thing seems like it takes some time to understand.
Still, though, I mean, you're imbibing it through the sensibility of the pop culture you're consuming that's being made by people that age often. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't know, our what's their names? The South Park guys, Trey Parker, Matt Stone, or is it the other way around?
Yeah.
Are they Gen X?
I think so. Yeah. Definitely. Yeah.
Like, they're, you know, I feel like I did grow up with that sort of Gen X irony being a sort of standard mode of comedy and of being sort of above, it's a plague on both your houses kind of politics. So, yeah, it's hard to know.
Trey Parker is 51 years old, born
There you
in
go.
1969. I definitely feel like people who are 50 are like right in that prime Gen
Yeah.
X thing, because like experiencing Nirvana and all that stuff being popular when you're like 23 and you can go to clubs and get drunk and fuck people and stuff like that, as opposed to like being 14, is so different. And as a set of memories, I mean, we talk about Cobain and Nirvana a lot on the show, in part because it had such an impact on us, but it was an impact that was like distant. I don't feel like a participant in that culture, really.
It's sort of that stuff that's ensconced in Amber, right? Because you think of like Kurt as this beautiful, sensitive, like just this beautiful creature who's just like having a lot of feelings.
Yeah.
Kind of, right? Because he's gorgeous and he has all these like sort of like interesting thoughts, and like he's just really, and then you're like, well, then what happened to Chris Novoselic, girl? And then you look at like what Chris Novoselic is up to and you're like, fuck.
Yeah.
Right? And so you do wonder like if some of the interesting things about Gen X are unfairly things that do get encased in Amber, right? So like look at like Winona, like look at the two leads, Winona and Ethan Hawke. You know, there is this unfair thing in which we want to encase Winona in Amber. We want to like make her Winona forever, you know, because we don't want to engage with her being this like middle-aged woman who like might just want to, I don't know, do different shit or like have more complex feelings or whatever. We want her to be the girl in we want her to be Jo in Little Women. We want her to be, you know, Lelena. The same thing with Ethan Hawke. And I think by contrast, he was allowed to age in certain ways where like he was able to control that narrative because he was able to do the Before trilogy where he did like Before Sunrise.
That's right. Yeah.
But that also like shows like what happens when you don't encase these people in Amber, right? Is that we see someone go from this like someone who always plays this like beautiful, interesting, sort of tortured, sort of puppy dog kind of person to like a complex, kind of increasingly miserable person, right? Because the whole part of the Before trilogy is like what happens when you fall in love in this mysterious Gen X way. Then over the course of 20 years, it's like, well,
they're interested in this stuff. Like Richard, I'm glad you brought up Richard Linklater as like a not only a Texas figure, but an Ethan Hawke figure, and someone who made that movie Boyhood. That's very much interested, it seems like, in like, you know, generational change. I wonder if you guys think about like, because this movie's about the Gen X kids hating their boomer parents and saying like, you guys, we hate you because we resent our parents because they used to believe in things like love, you know, and human rights and the environment or whatever. They used to have values, and now they're just like boring, sold out people. And it seems like the millennial kids say that about Gen X, like they're starting to say that about Gen X, right? Or like Zoomers saying that about their Gen X parents. Like I have students now who like they describe their Gen X parents as like they're basically like just a little bit older than me, and their parents are like, oh, my dad was really into Nirvana, or my dad like, you know, saw Lollapalooza and Jane's Addiction and that sort of stuff. And I'm thinking like, okay, so this is weirdly a similar cycle of like even the music being the representation of a certain sort of attitude. And I wonder, because it seems like the Gen X people are now the establishment.
Yeah, it's like I get frustrated sometimes by the whole generational discourse, which is really the result of like generations. That whole idea is something that consultants cooked up to be able to pitch themselves.
Fucking Gap ad, dude.
Right,
I feel like Gap ads were literally like the Gap. I don't know if you guys remember how big the Gap ads and why Janine Garofalo worked at the Gap, but like those ads with the khakis and like all the fucking dance sequences that were meant to be like Bubsy Berkeley and like fucking like Broadway music. They were calling back to like you know, sailors in World War II. It was all like very consciously entering into like, these were the previous generations and here's our generation. You're right. It is a total fucking brand. I mean, I think Reality Bites is in part picking up on that, right? Like the movie doesn't really succeed to me as any sort of deep satire or critique of American society, but it does pick up on a lot of this shit. It does pick up on a lot of like the notion that young people were noticing this. We're noticing that they were because it's like we're in cycles now. We've already they've already taken the hippie thing and sold it back to you. That already happened. So now we know that we're gonna watch it happen in real time. We're gonna watch them take our bullshit and sell it back to us now, like not like in the future, but now. And there's anxiety about that.
Yeah, and that's where I have sympathy for the Xers, right? Well, sympathy, not sympathy, right? Right, because it's like, okay, I remember in real time, literally from the time I was in my teens to like my mid-20s of like, millennials are the future. Millennials are great. Aren't millennials wonderful? Buy this stuff, millennials. By the time I was like in my mid-20s, shouldn't almost like millennials kill themselves in mass suicide because they're ruining the world? And I realized that was what was happening to like Gen Xers earlier. Like, they're idealistic, they're going to change things. They're not like, it's boomers saying they're not like us who sold out. They're going to be the ones who actually like use their ideals and like push forward. And then when like they realize they could sell stuff to them, they're like, your little shit's just like us. Fuck you, go fuck yourself.
Yeah.
What I do, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
What I do wonder is that, like, I think that Xers might generationally have more of a grudge against millennials and boomers, and hold on to that, is that like it feels like there's very little political space for them, right? Because I was thinking about this because this came up a lot in 2020. And the only two sort of like candidates for president that were like really huge, well, on the one hand you have Beto, who, if you lived in Texas, it's like, okay, need a burrito, it's Beto. Like, I mean, there's not enough fucking time on this show to unpack Beto and Beto-dem, but Beto is perhaps the most like Xer whoever X'd.
Totally.
And then the other one is Kamala Harris, right? Like, she is a Gen Xer, right? So what does that mean when like the only two Xer politicians, maybe the cast, like Julian Castro, or wait, was it Joaquin or it was Julian Castro for president? Like, maybe him, but he like dropped out way too early. Like, so you have these two different figures, and those are your like Xer politicians.
Yes.
And you're getting outflanked by that little faggot.
It's
like,
cringe. It's
Pete
cringe.
Buttigieg. If he's outpolling you, like, what does that even mean?
And
he shoots dogs. What does that even mean?
And end up losing to a guy who's actually too old to be a boomer.
That's right.
Yeah.
Someone who was like pen pals with Dolly fucking Madison and attended like Abe Lincoln's bar mitzvah.
Dude, I love that it ends up being like Trump versus Biden, and it's just like, yeah, none of that matters yet. I guess that Beto energy just isn't there, but that like that, you know, Beto, and fuck you for bringing up Beto, by the way, KJ, because now we got to talk about Beto, but like Beto and Kamala, the way I think that's part of the younger set, like sort of cringing about Gen X, because the way they invoke it is so cynical. Like Kamala will be like, I love just rocking out to the notorious
rocking out in my
B.I.G.
Timberlands and my Converse. And like,
Beto being like, you know, whenever I'm listening to Yola Tango, I love to think about social justice. And you're kind of like, wait a second, like this guy is selling bullshit to us, and it feels like Reality Bites was already savvy to that, and younger people are even savvier now about knowing that they're being sold something. They're being sold some sort of like some sort of quick image of a generation that really is bullshit.
And that they're being sold.
Yeah. Go ahead.
That's it. Like, they're being sold something, and that something is in a sense themselves.
Yeah. Right.
Right. Like a motherfucker who couldn't beat Ted Cruz. Like
there are people out there that are like
another Gen Xer
that are like, oh, like really own the generational thing. They're like, well, I'm a millennial, so that means that all I do is eat avocado toast and think about my student loans. And you're like, wait a second, like that's in other words, like I feel like there most likely are analogs to Reality Bites that are out right now as fucking Netflix shows or Hulu or something like that.
That's every fucking Hulu.
That are doing exactly. I mean, I feel like that High Fidelity with Zoe Kravitz is probably doing something like this. You know, where it's like, you know, all these little like signifiers that are thrown at you to sort of say, this is my generation. I'm thinking about like even Girls, like the Lena Dunham show was sort of an attempt to do.
That's how that fucking show starts. So she says, I don't think. Like her character, Hannah Horvath, says, I don't think I'm the voice of my generation. I think I am a voice of a generation.
Right.
Which is the most, like, if you want to talk about millennial delusion, like that is just like synchronous. Like it's, yeah.
Yeah, I think that anything that's claiming to be like the movie of the generation, it's always like these like really insufferable like white hipsters living in cities or something in their 20s. But I think if you're making that claim, you're going to have a podcast about you at some point that's saying, wait a second, is this really like is Reality Bites? I mean, is Reality Bites a picture of a generation at all, or is it just a movie that's just kind of like doing exactly what we're saying here, which is just picking up on some bullshit from the culture and throwing it back at you in a really? I mean, it is a. I was drawn into the like romantic elements of the movie, and there's some really funny lines. I mean, I think when her like at some point, her mom says to her like, you should work at Burgerama. Like, I saw a commercial where a little retarded boy is running the cashier, and like I feel like gonna run the cashier. I feel like you could do that. And she says that I was the valedictorian of my school. You know, I'm not retarded. She literally says that. You know, this is when you could say these words in cinema. And her dad replies, "Well, you don't have to put that on the application." I thought that was like a perfect distillation of all the like economic anxiety they were trying to do.
Well, then also the payoff when she actually can't do math. And David Spade is like, "What are these two numbers?" And she's like, "I don't know."
Should have put that little boy on the cash register.
I did want to speak a little bit to the Houston element here.
Of
Reality Bites. I know. Because
all the exteriors are Houston, but the interiors are Hollywood, and they're not only Hollywood interiors; they're very recognizable Hollywood interiors. All those like little bars and diners they're like those are in Lebowski. Those are in like all the like every Hollywood movie takes place in that fucking diner. And I'm thinking like this is a weird movie because when they're outside they're in Houston, but then when they're inside they're in a fucking Hollywood diner.
Though it is apparently they did model the main apartment, Winona and Garofalo's apartment, after an actual apartment in Montrose. And
that looks like a Montrose apartment.
It does look like a Montrose apartment. And
what's Montrose for those of us that don't know?
Okay, so Montrose is a neighborhood in Houston that is basically just a little bit west of downtown and like north of like the medical district, which is where all these big hospitals are. It's one of the big kind of economic centers of the city. And it's also like north of Rice. And Montrose is basically like I don't know.
It's the neighborhood.
Yeah.
It is.
And it's like if I were a single person, you know, in my 20s, in Houston, I would want to live in Montrose, even now.
Yeah. Are there like cool bars and restaurants and stuff there? Yeah.
It's really one of the few places in Houston that's you can live there and not have a car. I know people who do that.
So it's that coffee house dream. I mean, I hate fucking Portlandia, but there is one like sketch that I couldn't help seeing because it was everywhere when it came out. It's like the dream of the 90s is still alive in Portland.
Yes.
And it was sort of like this idea that you could like live in a city without a car, work a couple fucking shifts at a coffee house a week and live, you know, on someone's couch, and it was just all possible for you. That seems like what part of the reality that they're trying to get at reality in this neighborhood in Houston. Reality Bites.
We have people who don't have Southern accents, but often their parents do, which is.
I thought that was a great touch. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And
why would there be like a striving to not have the accent?
It's a real Sunbelt thing. So. And,
I don't even think it's conscious.
No, this is also a real Florida thing too, is that like a lot of people from Florida, they have a real strong, whether it's like an East Coast accent or a Southern accent or like even just sort of like a Miami accent, like their kids, you know, I learned how to not have an accent. Like,
was that like important to you? Because the reason
super important.
The reason I say that is because Claudia, my wife, she's from South Brooklyn, and her whole family and everyone around her in the neighborhood, they're like, they talk like movie characters. They have like heavy New York accents, and Claudia doesn't really that much, and she talks about that as like this important element of her identity was not to talk that way. I wonder like why did you not want to have a Southern accent?
I think, and I mean, a Florida accent is like distinct from like Texan. So I don't know,
Yeah.
you know, Bill, you can speak to that, but it is something of just like wanting to be taken seriously. Like it's also if like you're the first person to go to college in your family, you want to be able to get like a job. Like, and right now I'd be like, you want to be able to get a job. Like it's that weird sort of like I can fall into it at any second, but
like it's perceived as ignorant.
It's perceived as ignorant or lazy, or and when you're also adding on top of that, like I clearly like my voice has a nice bottom to it, but it's obviously gay, right? So it's like, it's like all right.
Gay and Southern.
It's right. It's like you are top, but you also like dick in your mouth, right? And so like it's like adding all of those elements.
That like Southern like genteel, like oh well my like that always sounded always sounded a little gay to me.
Well, everyone from Louisiana.
I mean, like honestly, the parents. I think
I'm just thinking of Kevin Spacey in Midnight of the
Garden. No, we're not talking. No, Cusack only if we're talking about that fucking movie.
Like I could tell you the Winona Ryder character, you could just like if I saw that exchange, like her and her parents, I'd be like, okay, the parents aren't actually from Houston. They moved to Houston for work and are from elsewhere in rural Texas. Which is
they're from deep east,
And then she grew up in Houston, where it's a city where you have a lot of people moving from out of state and probably went to high school with lots of people who just didn't have Southern accents. The screenwriter grew up in a suburb of Houston, Missouri City, which is pretty, and then she went to the big arts magnet school in downtown, which is where Beyonce went. And it's just weird because I'm not sure she ever lived downtown, because it's weird that the characters are frequently shown downtown, right? When they're celebrating their graduation, they're like on the skyscraper.
Yeah.
And then Ethan Hawke and Winona Ryder have their little walk. They're at these fountains. And it's like, no one in Houston really ever actually goes downtown except for like a baseball
And wait
game.
a second.
And Montrose is a drive from there. It's not.
Yeah.
Isn't like Ben Stiller like working? I mean, so is he like in some MTV affiliate in Houston? Because it seems like he has a very LA type job.
David, I would not think too much about this.
Yeah.
But it is
the Ben Stiller character would work downtown, but like no one lives there.
I'm not supposed to think that much about it. Yeah.
No one goes downtown to go to a bar. No one goes downtown to eat. But it does always loom. So I thought it was interesting that the apartment they found in Montrose, where you have some exterior shots, the skyline looms in the distance. And Ben Stiller, I found an interview with Ben Stiller by a Houston like public media, and when the movie came out, and he said, I wanted to shoot on the street so you could see the skyline, to have it kind of looming there in the background, kind of like real life looming in their lives. I thought that was interesting.
What a fucking asshole.
It's a weird city.
It's a little twatty.
But it is weird that Houston is a city where the skyline looms, but no one goes there.
Yeah,
and that is a thing.
That's a very Texan. Yeah,
I feel like that's true in like places like Albuquerque, New Mexico, and like other towns that have these like finance skylines that were created in the 70s, and then they're so fucking empty at night. Like there's no one around at all in those places. It's really scary. And you're right, it is a hallmark of the Sun Belt because. Yeah, like these towns existed already, and then they were built up with this weird kind of skyscraper land. But Houston, I mean, Bill, you're always pointing out that Houston is like, what, the fourth largest city in the United States? I mean, This is not like some little podunk town. I mean, this is a massive metropolitan area, although maybe it was a little smaller in the 90s.
And it's like, by some measures, the most diverse city in the nation now. I mean, this is a weird time where it's like the oil glut, or there's kind of a bust in the 80s, or what is it? Because really, like the Houston that I know is really the Houston that was created in
soil.
Well, the fracking boom of the 2000s.
So that's how I got my like previous job is right. Like just a series of like fracking developments led them to invest in that and create a glut of money. Which is where they started trying to make decisions about like pensions and all that shit.
Because like Houston's now a city where characters like those characters would actually actively move to. Whereas you gather that, like, I get the sense that these characters are supposed to have recently graduated from Rice.
Yeah.
Like Ethan Hawke's character is from Chicago, so I don't think he would go to University of Houston. He probably went to Rice. And they probably don't want to stay in Houston, whereas now it's, you have people moving to cities like Houston and elsewhere.
I wonder if
Houston isn't really a cool city in the 90s.
Yeah, I wonder if that's part of the
very much
movie. They don't really. It doesn't. There's not really a regional discourse in the movie, but like I feel like that's part of the anxiety being expressed is that like we're people that are sort of gonna have our lives distorted and sucked up by the Hollywood machine, and it's not going to be a real reflection of who we are at all. And they don't put that in like Houston terms, but I wonder why they decided to make this film a Houston movie. I think it works better that it is a place like this and not LA kids.
Oh, like I said, I mean, the screenwriter grew up there, and she and Ben Stiller went on a whole like scouting mission ahead of the release. So I just think that she had convinced him, that this was based on her own youth. Though she went to USC, she didn't go to Rice.
Right.
So I don't know. Apparently something about it took him.
I want final thoughts. How many thumbs are down or up are we giving this movie? What is how many Gen X? How many Gen X's do you give this movie?
I have to say, just as a movie, I think I actually kind of liked it earlier when it's more of a, I don't know. I kind of would like to see the version of this movie that's more of a ensemble movie
or a hangout movie.
I get a little bored, like something more like, I don't know, The Big Chill, or I don't know. And as it gets more into the kind of the bog down of the love triangle, and then we have that like last 15, 20 minutes that feels a little too long. We have the sad montage. I'm like, okay, like. But overall, I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I understand why people liked it.
Yeah.
How about you, KJ?
I'm grading on multiple criteria. I think relating to Ethan Hawke, it's like a shitty horn dog. Like I'm like, yeah, both thumbs up. I think overall the movie fails, but like there's a relatability there that's really sweet. I think that. And we've avoided the elephant in the room, which is like the end credits song, which is Lisa Loeb's "Stay," which is honestly the thing I knew about. Like I knew that song.
You're right. That's the thing. Right. That was the face of Reality Bites me because I never
knew that
saw this
song.
Movie.
No, I
and
never
that video.
Saw the movie. And that movie's so iconic. Ethan Hawke directed it, and like not to be like it's a bit jerk offy, but like. The structure of the song informed the video because he was like, you know what, this song actually never really repeats, only in the refrain. So like, let's do it in one take because there's no repeating. She looks iconic. She's in those, like, she looks like a little kitty cat with the tights.
She's cursed to wear those glasses for the rest of her life.
But if you looked like that in those glasses, would you not? I mean, you get to like be with Dweezil Zappa for 15 years and like wear that look.
Dude,
like,
I'm glad you brought this up, KJ, because that video really was. It's funny because I thought I looked at that and I thought to myself, and I'm sorry this is going to make me sound painfully straight to you, KJ, but I thought like this is the girl. Like this.
I thought she was beautiful. Like
this is the girl that's being sold to me, and this is the girl that I really want.
She's gorgeous. That song is like a perfect.
Yeah.
That song is a perfect pop song. It is like gorgeous. She looks impeccable. The movie's impeccable. Like that music, it is impeccable.
So something good did come out of Reality.
Something good did. One final thing I have on my notes, because my best friend would kill me if I didn't mention this, is that there actually, in terms of accents, there is such thing as a Houston accent, especially an old school Houston accent. And you know who actually has it? Marianne, our patron Saint Marianne Williamson. Like that is an old fashioned like Houston accent. So
really,
if you ever want
I'm always trying to pin down her accent. Like I'm always like, what is? Because she
She's
says,
got
you know
that
what?
husky,
you know what will win, Mr. Trump is love. Love.
We're on the field of love, and we
I
are
always
going
think
to like
her accent is like almost like soap opera accent or something.
It's
like
a
that.
little that, but like older people, like as I have learned, like her and Pauline Oliveros, the avant-garde musician. Like it's like if you want to know the two like ends of the old Houston accent.
This was fun, guys. I really appreciate this. I did enjoy this movie, but it was weird to watch it because I was so self-conscious watching it. I was like, this is a film that was pitched to a very specific type of person, and I missed it. But now I get it. I get like sort of what the Gen Xers were into. But again, it's such a narrow vision of what a Gen X person was. I was like, were there Gen X people that are not white? I wonder if that exists. Because certainly it's not present in Reality Bites.
No.
More like Reality Whites. Am I right?
I swear to God, I will come to Calvin to beat your ass.
Thanks, guys. We'll talk to you again soon.
All right.
Thanks, Dave.
All right, I think that is going to do it for today. I want to thank my guests, KJ Shepard and Bill Black. Always fun to talk with those guys. I hope you enjoyed our conversation. Please come by our Thursday live sessions on YouTube every Thursday at 1 p.m. Pacific time. And if you can support our show, we've got lots of bonus episodes, including tons of movie and pop culture stuff, lots of weird conspiracy and UFO episodes, you name it. There's a lot of stuff on that Patreon. You get a lot for $5 a month. I tell you what, go to patreon.com/nostalgiatrap. Thank you to all our subscribers. It really makes the whole thing work. And we'll talk to you all very soon. All right, take care. See ya.